So in recent news, one of music's biggest music icons has passed away, Quincy Jones. Mr. Jones's career covered over 6 decades in multiple genres. He worked with artists such as Frank Sinatra and Michael Jackson, countless others during his illustrious career. Quincy Jones.
Icon.
Man.
Legend.
Thoughts?
I mean, this is Quincy Jones we talking about here.
Man.
Where does it begin? You know what I'm saying? I mean, he lived multiple lifetimes in one. He's responsible for 2 of the biggest albums in the history of music itself. He's worked with legendary artists. He is the fabric of music. I mean, he started in jazz and transitioned into being the producer that we know, the executive producer, the one that really found artists. I mean, he's responsible for finding Tevin Campbell, 𝗗𝗘𝗏𝗧𝗦, just to name a few. And he was born in Chicago, so that's another Midwest representative that Midwest makes the world go round as far as musically, as far as I'm concerned.
Talk to him.
Now, Quincy Jones is an icon. I can't really say much more than that, honestly.
You know, we talk about the producer GOAT here, the producer GOAT there, you know, us being associated with hip hop for so long. That always comes up, but this is actually the guy that's the guy from a production standpoint. His documentary that was on, I believe, Netflix came out a few years ago. Amazing. I suggest anybody has not watched that, please go back and watch it.
The We Are the World one too.
Yes, that one as well. How he pulled everybody together that night. Good call. But nah, man, this dude is just phenomenal, and I don't want it to get lost that he's a musician first. Trained musician and composer, writer, big band leader. So when Sinatra found him and he was just a young writer coming up, and the next thing you know, he's leading his band, that was crazy back then. And then you fast forward to the Wiz, and then now you starting to look at Michael Jackson's records that we all know, and an actual producer like this story.
Will Smith's resurgence is due to Quincy Jones.
100%. Talking about when Will tells a story about how Q made him audition for the Fresh Prince when all those people were there, wouldn't let him leave. Like, he has his foot in everything, and he preceded us all and still was a part of our childhood. That speaks volumes as to his longevity, you know, as a producer and just as a creative. So, nah, man, one of my favorite quotes is when he said, Diddy wouldn't know a B flat if it hit him. I love that comment.
Yeah.
Because it speaks so much to a dude that was cut from the cloth that's an actual musician. And he's stunting on him like, okay, yeah, they call you producer and this and that because you can, you know, get in the studio and point your finger a couple times. But nah, fam, I was on the sheet music. Like, we was writing this back in the 50s and 60s. That's the biggest. I love that comment.
That's true to a lot of artists nowadays too, though. What Quincy said, like you said, they were cut different.
Yeah.
But what's weird is him dying on Diddy's birthday,
man,
or the night before.
Oh yeah, I didn't put.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it like that, bro. That's a good call. Hey, I didn't even think about it like that.
Yeah, man. But yeah.
Now this dude he's one of one, man. He's inspired and influences all at some point. If you're creative,
you know, one of the things that, you know, and I gotta just go ahead and say that I took this from 𝗵𝗵 Jones when he spoke about him a little bit earlier, is like there's a Forrest Gump like quality to Quincy Jones's career. You know, when you think about, okay, I'm going to go to Seattle and I just happen to run into Ray Charles.
Man.
Okay. Then when you talk about the story about Will Smith literally just being in LA at a party because, you know, his girlfriend said, hey, maybe you should go out to LA and see if you can get on the Arsenio Hall show. This is when Will Smith was flat broke and, you know, his most recent album had failed. He had no reason for anybody to even want him to be on TV at that point. And then he winds up at this party with Quincy Jones, and that, you know, and without that 10 minutes that he talks about, there is no Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which means there is no 5 billion or whatever it is that Will Smith has generated, you know, and been, you know, one of the most bankable stars in the history of the movies. And then, you know, of course, then he winds up producing and then doing music for The Color Purple, which is something that has stood the test of time. You know, then even if you talk about, you know, everybody knows the story of Michael Jackson in Thriller and Off the Wall and Bad, but basically they just happen to meet on the set of The Wiz.
Yeah.
And he was like, you know, and at this point, Quincy was doing, you know, scores and he had done jazz. But to step into the realm of pop music, that really wasn't, that wasn't really something so much people, it was all jazz artists. It wasn't say, hey, let's do some dance music. That wasn't, for this extremely young artist at the time. He had been working with Frank Sinatra and people who had been, a bit more established.
Yeah.
Because even at that time, Quincy's a great deal older than Michael. You got to think about it. This is how transcendent Quincy Jones has been. He has 2 documentaries about his life. One of them came out in 1990. It was called Listen Up. Remember, that was a big deal because it came out around the same time as the Back on the Block album.
Yeah.
Which is something that is also, because Quincy, honestly, he could have been one of those guys that was dismissive of hip hop.
Yeah.
But he embraced hip hop. That's how Big Daddy Kane and Melly Mel and Ice-T have Grammys, because they were featured on, I believe the track was a Birdland. There was a couple things, Back on the Block, the actual song Back on the Block, but there was some remixes out there.
The Tomorrow record with Tevin Campbell and all the kids singing in the background.
Right.
I think that's on that album.
So
that's one of his best joints.
So when you think about the fact that he had a situation where him and Kendrick Lamar actually had like a situation when they were cool. So you can draw a line that starts at Quincy Jones. I'm sorry, not Quincy. Of course, Quincy Jones, but starts at Ray Charles in Seattle.
Yeah,
and then goes all the way to Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah,
and there's really not anybody else in American pop culture that can have that kind of career to where you can't say there's not a part of the culture he did not touch, whether it be television, because of course he was part of the
print.
Yeah, television,
and print.
With Vibe magazine, television with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Mad TV. These are things that cannot be dismissed as far as the pop culture, and did it on a major level. Emmys, pretty sure there's several Grammys mixed in. Probably
there they are.
Yeah. I
some
mean,
of them.
If I don't know all the stats, but there's probably at least a Tony or an Emmy nomination all in there somewhere. So I mean, there's pretty much nobody as accomplished as Quincy Jones. And I know people say, 91. It's so sad that look, man, he got the most out of 91 years. I think is anybody could have got out of 91
That's what we call a full life. That's a full
lived
life.
Multiple lives in one. So
Yeah.
Here's a little trivia though about Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Which I know the Kid and Play was initially supposed to take those.
Yes,
actually,
heard that story.
That was something else that they were offered.
Mm-hmm.
Was it?
No, it was actually that, and they didn't get it because of they had a lawsuit or something going on with something.
No,
so they moved on from them and then start messing with decided to go with
House Party.
No. See, this is what, because like I saw Kid and Play. They were actually on Willie D's situation. They kind of cleared this up because remember they had that cartoon,
right?
Yeah,
and they were upset that the cartoon got canceled because cartoon was actually around the same time as the first House Party. And
I remember that.
They basically had a deal because it was Quincy Jones was pitching them as well, and it's going to be this thing with them and some of the comedian Don Rickles.
Mm-hmm.
There was going to be kind of like a odd couple, like old white man with 2 young black kids in some college situation, and that was going to be their show. So
I always thought it was with what's called
it was because it was this whole thing where a story got crossed up that initially I think it's because initially they wanted House Party to be Fresh Prince and Jazzy Jeff. And then
that's what it was.
That's what
they got in the mix up because they were using the Nightmare on Elm Street,
exactly,
and they had a lawsuit going with the company.
Yeah, and so like they got the first right of refusal, and they said, well, it worked out for Kid and Play.
Yeah,
so
what's crazy is as people that work in music or whatever you want to call it, and Lone can speak to this from production standpoint, the way music is created now with Ableton and MIDI tracks and how all this stuff is, how hard it is to actually, if you've sat down and read sheet music before and you know how hard it is to actually score jazz and score music like that, your mind has to be on a completely different level to be able to write that out. So it's amazing, man, to think that he went from that all the way to, like you said, messing with Kendrick. And you hear Dr. Dre talk about like he's the Godfather, he's the GOAT, he's the one. It's just, I mean, hey, like you said, man, that's 2 or 3 lives, full ones.
Yeah, I mean, he's a career musician. He literally breathed life into music, and that was his lifeblood as well. So,
facts.
I mean, what else can you say about him?
And
Job well done.
Job well done.
And he liked beautiful women, man. Shout out to Quincy. You always got the bad one.
Facts.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, rest in peace to Quincy Jones.